Welcome to Rethinking Trade with Lori Wallach, a podcast that unpacks international trade and how it affects you without putting you to sleep.
Welcome to Rethinking Trade with Lori Wallach. I'm Lori Wallach. Today, we're going to discuss an element of President Trump's trade and tariff threats that have gotten less attention. Those are attacks on Europe's online privacy protections and AI oversight and competition policies. It seems Trump is speaking on behalf of America's big tech monopolists. And today we're very lucky to have with us Christina Irian. She's an associate professor at the Institute of Information Law at the University of Amsterdam. She's globally recognized for her research on European digital and data law and how so-called digital trade protections can threaten and undermine those consumer safeguards, as well as create problems with oversight of algorithms. We're also very lucky to have with us Rethink Trade's research director, Danielle Rangel, who has written many of the most interesting analyses of how these digital trade rules affect U.S. law and policy, including recently an excellent new paper revealing that the U.S. Congress and U.S. government agencies and many U.S. states are now enacting some laws on privacy and on other data oversight concerns like security that are finally having us catch up to where the European Union has been. That paper shows a lot of the digital trade rules that big tech wants could undermine US law now also. So let's start out with having Christina just set the scene a little bit for us to describe at a high level what the European approach has been with respect to big tech, particularly about data and data flows.
Thank you very much for having me on this podcast. Thank you for the kind introduction and greetings from Amsterdam. I am indeed specialized in the interface between EU regulation of digital and data, and it is a lot. Yeah, we have quite a intense regulatory framework now, which has been catching up with the challenges that the EU has faced and in protecting European values, fundamental rights, consumer rights, and also transparency, non-discrimination, and so forth. You may recall that we started all with the General Data Protection Regulation, which was coming into force in 2018, which has been setting a very high standard for the protection of individuals' personal data, including also regulating cross-border data flows. And I would like to stress that it wasn't make it impossible to transfer data abroad, but it was making it conditional on ensuring a high level of data protection even once it has left the European Union. And especially with the US, we have always maintained most of the time a framework like the Privacy Shield, the Safe Harbor, and now the Transatlantic Data Protection Framework, which allows data flows between the EU and the US. And in the over time, we have added additional regulatory frameworks. For example, the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act are two very important new legislative frameworks which focus on regulating and correcting the power of very large online platforms, among others. They are not specifically targeting US online platforms, but the bigness of it. So every platform that will reach the threshold, which is calculated by the number of subscribers, 10% of all users in the European Union, if they are subscribed on a large online platform, then these regulations will kick in. So it is a power-related regulatory framework that we know already from competition and antitrust law, but it is ex ante. So it basically applies without that there first needs to be an infringement. We also try to come to terms with the value of data for the new digital economy. So we have passed the Data Governance Act and the Data Act, and the EU is constructing something that is called data spaces. And in all of this, also you need to deal with data flows. So the main point here is that data flows are beneficial, especially when it's about communication, like making this podcast. But when it is about harnessing and creating value from data, it is sometimes useful to first bundle the data in one place, make a governance arrangement where companies, firms, but also individuals are happy to share their data, and then allow the use of this data to extract value from this data. And that is then not anymore exclusive. So we have to talk more about how to make the value of data. Value creation from data possible, and for that you need good data governance arrangements. Without data governance arrangement of this kind, data still flows, but it flows in rather unstructured ways according to the logics of power of platforms, because they are creating environments where data kind of travels to them, but it doesn't create value for the society as a whole. So that is why data governance arrangements are useful. And yes, you can create localization and boundaries for data and still allow the value of the data to be beneficial for also companies in the EU, but also from abroad. And finally, we have the AI Act. Yeah, this is also a very new piece of legislation that is rather voluminous, but the core of it is that it regulates, according to a risk-based approach, various tiers of artificial intelligence systems and generative AI. And only high-risk AI systems actually have to pass a market assessment test, but all the other AI systems can be introduced to the market without further ado. And an important aspect of this is, of course, that we want to have tools in place to protect individuals and also values, but in the end, to also allow AI to be penetrating our economies and society. So it's about the balance that is struck.
That's a very helpful overview. And imagine governance on behalf of actual humans and their interests and needs of data and big tech. What a shock! We don't have a lot of that in the US, though it's slowly catching up. Folks, think about when you go to Europe and you get on a website or you interface with a platform, and suddenly all these questions pop up about what you would like that platform to do with your personal data. That is the daily experience of Europeans, and not so much in the US, except not for privacy purposes, not so much for public interest purposes, but for security. The United States, in the last number of years, has started to actually also enact rules that put some constraints, limits on what the private sector can do with our data, personal data,